Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us. And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. I am Bill Snyder. It's great to be with you, and as always, you can see that I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Ann DeSantis. We are once again here in wrapping up this series on our book that we co-authored together called Hearts Burning Within Us. And so, Ann, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I've been loving this series, too, because, we wrote this book. It's called Hearts Burning Within Us back in 2021. And this is the first time we've done a podcast series on it. And so I love the fact that we're able to kind of continue to have these discussions on those important and burning questions of faith that young people have, college age students have. Yeah. And so that's what we're devoting this podcast to. Yeah. And on this one, this is part 4 of the book. And part 4 is growing in faith. And so during this podcast series, this is the 4th of 4 podcasts, is that we talked about the different sections of our book. And if you haven't bought the book yet, I want to make that invitation to all of you to go to patchworkheart.org and purchase this book. You can also get it on Amazon. And it was written by both Bill and myself and also 2 other authors. Their names are Maggie Riggins and Jennifer Oakley. Her name before getting married was Jennifer Southerton. And so, I love this topic of growing in faith, Bill, don't you?
Yeah, and just real quickly, you mentioned Amazon, and for some reason I was jumping over there the other day and checked out the book price, and right now Amazon has it for like $4 off, so you can get the book for like $10. Ordinarily, we sell it on our website for $15 or $14.99, and it's just above $10 right now on Amazon. So, encourage you to go over there to Amazon and buy it. For some reason, they have discounted the copy of the book, so that's great. They do what they want with their pricing. We do what we want with ours. But right now, it's a little cheaper. So go over there, especially for the holiday season. If you know a college student that's coming up, I know we haven't hit Halloween yet. We're not supposed to talk about the holiday season, before Halloween. But here we are. And they have it on discount. So, get it in your hands and give it to a loved one, because it's really important that we continue to share the faith and grow in faith our whole life, right?
Yes. Growing in faith for your whole life is a topic not just for college age students, it's for all of us, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And I think that this book is geared for that age group, but even for anyone who's outside of the age group, older than that, I think it's definitely appropriate really for anyone. So if you're interested in getting the book, please do take a look at Amazon for Hearts Burning Within Us. Now, one of the chapters in this section I thought would be a great discussion for us. It's called Building a Desire for Mass. And the question in the book, I'm just going to go right to it. So I will be reading, admittedly. It says, how can I build a desire to go to Mass and practice my faith? And the answer that we gave, now it's kind of a long answer, but I'm going to read a little bit of it. It says, your interest in building a desire for going to Mass is exciting, and you're not alone in your pursuit. College is most likely the first time in your life when you were in charge of this decision in your life. Do I go to Mass or not? And then there's a lot more that we discuss in the chapter, which I won't give it away. But one of the things that we talked about was the beauty of the Eucharist. And it's funny because during this time, this is a time in our Catholic Church and in a lot of the archdioceses and dioceses where there is a reinvesting in catechesis on the Holy Eucharist. And what we did write in this book, I am going to read this one part. The answer that we gave was that one reason I am motivated to attend Mass every week without fail is that I'm convinced without a shadow of doubt that the Eucharist really is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. And it says this also, consider this, Catholicism is the only religion on the planet that believes that their God is physically present perpetually on the earth with them. And not only does he desire to be worshipped and adored in the tabernacle, but he desires to become one with you in the reception of communion. So I do think that's a beautiful topic. Bill, I don't know if you had anything to say about that, because I believe that you might have been part of that chapter. Now, all of us had like a little bit of, we divided up these sections where some of us were had a little bit more of a role in certain areas. Like we had morality, we had church teaching, we had evangelization, and we had another area. And I believe that, Bill, you had church teaching, so I didn't know if you had anything on that to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when we were authoring the book, if I remember correctly, Maggie said, if you have a little bit to add on the Eucharist here, it might be appropriate. We add a lot on the Eucharist in different segments throughout this book. I mean, there's not one direct question that the kids had about the Eucharist. Is it really the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus? But because it is the source and summit of our faith, as the Catechism talks about, we, as authors of the book, wove that through many of the different questions. And this was one of them when they were talking about building a desire to go to Mass. And unfortunately, there's such a need, and you kind of highlighted it right there, about the church focusing in on the Eucharistic revival that is going on currently, church-wide in the United States, because we need to have a deeper understanding and awareness of what what the Eucharist is, which is truly Jesus. So when Maggie was writing this question, and there's some really good points in there, I want to bring them out as well, but she touches on the perspective, the role, the community, right, that we experience, and then of course grace in the Eucharist, and then finally adult responsibility. So those are the kind of the areas that we look at for building the desire to go to Mass. But when it came to the Eucharist in particular, I had the privilege of actually traveling to Italy and seeing the Eucharistic miracle of Lanciano with my own two eyes. And so there's nothing that anyone can do that can convince me otherwise. There's not a person on the planet that can tell me that what I saw was, fake or whatever. I saw it with my own two eyes, and it was an unbelievable, amazing encounter that I had with Christ in the Eucharist. And so I like to talk about the Eucharistic miracles. I highlight that in the book. I encourage anybody to go over to realpresence.org if they're looking for that. There's like over 200 or 300 documented Eucharistic miracles that they highlight on their website. There have probably been countless more throughout history, but these are the ones that have been documented and followed and studied by the Vatican. And it's amazing. It's beautiful. We have saints like Carlo Acutis who dedicated his young life before he passed away to the Eucharist and creating websites like this. So there is so much importance placed on the Eucharist, and if we understand what it is, why would we want to miss Mass? Why we want to miss Mass when we know that this is a God who comes into our lives so intimately, so perfectly, in communion, right? He says, "Here, I am the perfect one. I am going to fill all of your imperfections. I'm coming to you because I desire to be with you. And I don't just desire to be with you, one day in heaven. Yes, absolutely I do. I want you united perfectly, completely with me in heaven one day. But right now I desire to be with you." And that's the beauty of the Eucharist, right? Now we have to be in the state of grace, and we have to do all of those things, to receive communion. We're not, and we certainly talk about that in the book as well. But having an understanding of that this really is Jesus, and that when we are in relationship and communion with Him, He can powerfully come into our lives, each and every day, right? Every day we can receive communion. That's what the church says. Now is that the what do I want to say it, the case for the average college student? Probably not. Maybe with some. The amazing college students that are going to Mass every day at Franciscan University or Ave Maria University or some of those really awesome Catholic colleges. But this book was targeted toward maybe some of those college students that are kind of weaving in and out of their faith life and whatnot, to spark that. So having that understanding, having that, amazing experience of Jesus in the Eucharist and having a little bit of wonder and awe, I think drives us to go to Mass, right? It's the number one reason why I attend Mass. It's not because of the homily. It's not because of the music. It's not because of anything else but communion. Now, all those things are nice, and if they are good, right? Like if the music's good and the priest gives a good homily, that's nice. But it's not the reason I go to Mass. I go to Mass for Jesus in the Eucharist and to be one with Him in Holy Communion. So that's my kind of feeling on it. I think, throughout the book, of course, we encourage kids to participate in Mass, right? That's another big thing we talk about in the book, is to participate in the Mass. Don't just sit on the sidelines, actually be a lector or be part of the music ministry on your college campus. Go do these things actively on your campus. And you will feel much more a part of things. And there are so many different areas in which you can participate, as a layperson in the Mass.
Well said. And I think it's also timely because we have something special to share. Bill and I have something very special to share about our ministry having to do with this topic. And it doesn't matter when you're listening to this podcast, even though we're taping it in October 2022, because in December of 2022, we are doing a Eucharistic Summit on December 6th, 7th, and 8th. It is a virtual summit with 20 awesome Catholic authors and speakers, including Bishop William Byrne. So that's going to be amazing. And you can sign up for it, register for it, actually on the website for the foundation that I represent. That's at nonatus.org. We have a registration button there. And it is a virtual summit. So basically, you're going to hear talks from all of these wonderful speakers. Some of them are Kendra Von Esch and Bishop William Byrne and Gary Zimak and Alison Gingras and more, many more than that, all talking about their love of the Eucharist and talking about ways that you can love Jesus more in the Eucharist, and also to catechize others and help to bring others back to Mass, and understanding why it's important to really, as Bill said, to really partake in the Eucharist each week. And if you can, more than that. So please do check that out. Register for our summit. And, it doesn't matter if you're watching this podcast in 2022 and you're able to register for the summit right now, because it is a virtual summit. The videos are going to be available after the fact. So if you're watching this later on, be sure to go to Patchwork Heart on YouTube, Patchwork Heart Ministry, or patchworkradio.org to be able to watch that summit. And it's also going to be on the St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation Facebook page and on our pages too at nonatus.org. So I think we're going to move on to another question in the book, which I think that was our goal with this podcast, to just kind of talk about some of those questions.
Yeah.
And another one is keeping schoolwork and faith life in balance. And the question itself is, how does one balance and prioritize schoolwork and faith life? And some of our answer, I won't read it all, but we'll discuss it, is it says, how do I find the time? You already have so many commitments with classes, clubs, athletics, homework, employment. How on earth do you fit faith into your life? Yeah. St. Francis is quoted in saying, let us find God in the midst of so much business. How do we do that? So let's unpack that a little bit, Bill.
Yeah, man, I'll just tell you, if you're a college kid out there and you think you're busy, wait till you have a 17-month-old. That's all I have to say, right? Because then you'll truly be busy chasing them around the house and only doing work when they take naps, like me. But no, it's one of the most difficult things to do in this world is to avoid distraction, right? And I think, all the shiny things of the world, it's so easy for us. We have attention spans that are like 5 seconds. We go, ooh, shiny thing, new thing, I'm going to get that. And that's Satan's MO. He knows that if he can keep you distracted from what is truly important in life, then you end up just going down the path of pleasure at some point. We really have to examine in our hearts what is important and follow that. Now, if our faith is important to us, it goes to number one on the list. You know, the first commandment is, I am the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods beside me. Yet how many gods do we place in front of the one true God, right? Well, my schoolwork is really important, or my athletics are really important, or watching athletics is really important, right? I'm a huge Phillies fan, and I know you're a big Phillies fan. The Phillies are headed to the World Series this week, which is awesome. But if I place that ahead of going to church, I put my idol there. If I place that ahead of, the importance of God in my life, any person or anything that you place ahead of that is it is breaking the first commandment. And so that's my take on it. Incorporate your faith into your daily life, right? In the midst of the busyness, incorporate your faith. I remember shooting the Long Ride Home television series with Bear Wozniak a few years ago, before the pandemic began, and we would be traveling and going, and we would just be working, filming, and shooting video and audio out on the road. And what would we do? We would pray the rosary in between on the way in the car, to the different areas and the different shoots. You can be busy, but you can have holy conversation. You can spend 10 minutes at night, reading a book that is, spiritually uplifting versus, sitting there for another 10 minutes on your smartphone. There are ways you can incorporate your daily life and finding the balance, right? So that you can be effective in the world, but not of the world. And that is, just something for me, I think. But I know, Anne, I'm sure you have perspective on this as well, because you have, you have much older children, and you probably see it from a totally different angle as well.
Yes. I do think that actually, I'm going to backtrack a little bit on something here, because Bill and I did a whole series on parenting, a podcast series through this podcast, the Sowing Hope podcast. If you haven't heard that, please do go to the YouTube channel, because there's a playlist there for our parenting series. It was very good because we covered parenting from all the way from the very beginning, even before the child is born, until adulthood. And we did 10 podcasts on it. But one of the things that I stressed during the entire series, which, Bill, you probably remember this, is that catechizing and teaching your kids about their faith is something that you start very early. And I think for me, my experience of why did both of my kids keep their faith when they went off to college? And I really honestly think it didn't have that much to do with me. Maybe good decisions, but not with me per se. The good decisions were that I made a decision when they were babies to start teaching them about where they came from, and heaven and Jesus and the saints, and just, not to pound it into their heads to a point where they just became uninterested in it, but tried to make it something fun, so that by the time they got into the teen years and then even to the college years, it was so much a part of who they were that losing their faith was going to be, not as common for somebody like them. And they didn't lose their faith, thank God. But that's what this book is really about. And as Bill said, we have people, obviously there's different levels of colleges, right? And college experiences. And sometimes Catholics that decide to go to the Steubenville, the St. Francis University in Steubenville, Ohio, the Franciscan University, or Ave Maria University. We geared this book for students who are really searching for their faith and maybe are struggling a little bit. But I would just say that my experience as a parent was that, and I speak to all parents out there, is it's never too late. So even though I started pretty young with my kids, beginning to show your interest in your own faith is the best way to evangelize your children. And so if you're a parent, even of a college age student, when your child sees that you care more about your faith, that's an important way to evangelize them. And so that's kind of my take on it. Now, and one last question, Bill, I thought we could discuss is when being a good person is not good, when it is not good enough. And in our book, we say, I'm just going to read what it says. Why is it not enough just to be a good person? And we begin by saying that the word good can mean different things in different circumstances. When thought of in a theological context, we see this word in the creation story in Genesis. God declares the world good and very good, thus categorizing his creation in a way that signifies its essence, reality, and foundational truth. Creation is good in its ontological sense, its design and intent to show God's glory and power. Human beings and creation are inherently good because of our creation. I'm not going to read the whole entire thing, but what we talk about in this chapter is that we have to look at goodness in terms of what is God's definition of goodness, right, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, the word to use is relativism, right? Like, what is uh, good for you in the world? Like the world teaches, oh, my truth, right? So they say things like, it's my truth, but it's not yours. Well, there's really one truth. uh, and, we hear that all the time. And so what is good, right? Like we have to have parameters for what is good, and it's just like any sporting event or any competition. If you don't have rules, no one can win, right? Let's just be very, very honest. Like if you do not have rules and a set of guidelines, nobody can win, and you have to have a structure in which good is defined. And I can be, real frank with you. The human history has been trying to define that since its beginning. And every major religion, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and even non-religions, right? Like state governments, they have a definition of what is acceptable good behavior and what is not acceptable good behavior. And this has been going on since the beginning of time. However, recently we've been seeing in society an absolute chaos. And why? Because the rules don't apply anymore to people. It's like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. I can go in and I can shoplift $500 worth of stuff and not get caught. I can do this. I can do that. The structure of what is good has to be defined, and the church and the Catholic Church believes that like all religions too, that their set of guidelines to live by is the way that we define what is true and good, and the things that fall outside of that are not. So when we look at what is good and what it means to be a good person, what standards are we using to measure good? As Anne said, what are we doing to measure good? What is the benchmark? Because just saying I'm a good person, but yeah, I'm a good person, but yeah, but I'm stealing, $700 TVs from Walmart just because I can during all this looting in California or wherever it is, or I'm doing this, I'm doing that. What is that? And is there a common set of rules and guidelines that we are following, or is there not? And I'll just challenge you as a young adult, as a college student, if you're watching this, that right now there is so much dissension and discord because what they say. I mean, I don't know what college campus you attend, but I know that some college campuses have free speech bubbles where you have to stand inside that bubble if you want to speak your mind out. We can't have a discourse with people who disagree with us. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. Right? I don't know about you, but I mean, Does that sound like a free society? Does that sound like a society that God, wants us to have? We can talk about our truth inside this bubble. Uh, I don't think that's the way God intended this to take place. I don't think that that's good, because it goes against the the definitions in our belief about what is good. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I think, Ann.
No, you had a lot to say there, and I agree with what you're saying because there has to be parameters, right? And we have to be able to have some kind of catechesis that we can uh, reach to and study and learn and understand why we do what we do, why we believe what we believe. And I'll just end this little part of the discussion by saying that I think when we look at that whole idea of what does it mean to be a good person, is that as Catholics, of course, we can say to ourselves, what is a good Catholic? Is it someone who goes to Mass every week? Is it someone who receives the sacraments? Is it someone who follows the 10 Commandments of the Church and the precepts of the Church? And the answer to those questions is yes, that's part of it. But the other part of it is, and I think we did cover this in our book, it's not only a rule following, but it's also the way that we treat other people, the way that we interact with people. Some people in the Catholic Church don't like to use the word nice person because they feel that that is not a relevant word for our faith, that it doesn't matter if someone is nice, it doesn't matter the demeanor. And that's the way I look at it. Nice to me, nice is demeanor, whereas good is actually the following of God, right? The doing and following God's commandments and being and truly doing good and avoiding evil. So nice is not really that. Nice is a demeanor. But I do think, and personally, I do think that it has a role in evangelization, because if all we do are following our faith, but we're grumpy about it, we're not nice about it, we seem kind of, there's no joy about us. There is no niceness about us. It certainly doesn't help for us to make the world a better place when there's no smile, there's no greeting, and there's no care. And sometimes even in the Catholic Church, we can fall into wanting to be popular. We can fall into a little holy huddle only with our own friends and excluding other people who need to have outreach, who need to know that someone cares. And Bill, I know I wrote the book in 2021, Love and Care for the Marginalized. And in our book, one of the things that we wrote in this chapter on the same discussion in Hearts Burning Within Us, we say that being a good person in light of making outreach to the marginalized, caring about people in big and small ways, and simply living a virtuous life is very important. The problem or confusion arises when we equate goodness with holiness, which is ultimately what we are called to be. Contemplate on how God is calling you to be virtuous in all circumstances. He's always speaking to us through prayer and discernment. And so I think that was a good answer to that question, because I do certainly think in evangelization, especially for college age students, they don't want to see religious people who are into their faith that just seem like they never can have any fun. Everything is so serious, and there's never any balance between following the faith. People who really love God, they are happy people, and they love everyone. And they're not people who are afraid to talk to the loner or the one that doesn't have friends or the one that isn't dressed right or the one that's parents don't have a lot of money or the one that just doesn't have a circle of friends to hang out with or seems kind of out of place.
Oh,
And so
absolutely.
that's my opinion.
Oh no,
And
you're
I
right
do
on.
think it's a way for us to be better Catholics, is that we have to add two and two together, right? Catechesis and being kind. And I'm going to say it. And like I said, I know some people agree, but I do think that being nice also has a role.
Yeah, and the 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 attractiveness is something that's so important. To attract people. Matthew Kelly said that in one of his books. That holiness is attractive. It's not something that pushes people away, right? And if we are not attracting, if we're not happy, if we're not joyful, if we're living our faith, with a sourpuss, kind of attitude all the time, oh, I have to do this. This is such a burden. Oh my gosh. Like, then why? Jesus says, that the burden is light, that my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Like, live that scripture out, live his words out, that, we all go through junk. Every single one of us goes through junk in life. There's not a person that avoids it. We have bad situations that occur to us all the time. But being joyful and recognizing that Christ is walking with us through that enables us to be happy. It enables us to have those moments of joy amidst the difficulties and suffering in life. Nobody gets to escape that. So I think you're definitely spot on. If you're walking, and maybe you're a Catholic listening to this and you're like, oh yeah, I have been kind of living my faith just by, being a sourpuss dude all the time. And you're like, start smiling, start welcoming, start, caring, and bringing people into the faith, because, holiness is attractive, as Matthew Kelly says. It's beautiful. And so, yeah, this was an awesome podcast, Jen. A lot of fun.
It really is, and it's been an awesome series.
Mhm.
May I ask all of you who are listening to this podcast, since it's a 4-part series, that we have a playlist on YouTube. If you go to Patchwork Heart Ministry on YouTube, you'll see the playlist for our Hearts Burning Within Us 4-part series. And I'd ask you to share it with your diocese, your archdiocese, any groups or organizations, because, Bill and I would love to come and do a talk for you about these topics to your youth groups or to your young adult groups. We would love to be more actively involved in that. I'm so glad we wrote this book, Bill, and thank you so much for all you do for this podcast and for our listeners too.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to remind everybody as well as we wrap up today that you can sign up for our newsletter over on our website. We really encourage you to do that. We've got a brand new website, or at least a redesigned website, same URL. You can go right over to patchworkheart.org and check that out. And as you do that, don't forget to check out our friends' Fiat Ministry Network as well, fiatministrynetwork.tv. But until next time, from all of us here at Patchwork Heart Ministry and the St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation, may God bless you and your families. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and andesantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or Andy Santis 2.